Hi everybody, and welcome to our complimentary webinar today, brought to you in partnership with Sprinklr, Auscontact's National Gold sponsor. The session today is entitled Using AI to Future-Proof Your Contact Centres, a Self-Service Strategy. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guest, Minta, we hope to spark your interest and engage you in the conversation, as well as provide you with some ideas or some thinking you can take back to your respective businesses. To round off the session, we will have Q&A at the end of the webinar. So I'm Fran Southwood. I'm the CEO of Auscontact, and I will be your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, I'll just quickly run through some housekeeping with you. To get the most out of the session, remember interaction is key. So to maximise those benefits, we really want you to use the chat feature. Ask questions as they come to you. Remember, there's no need to take too many notes. We will issue links to the recording once the session's over, so you don't need to take too many notes for that reason. To interact with us, use the Q&A button on the control panel. You can ask questions or you can make comments either using QA or chat. If you're anything like me, I always think of a great question, but if I don't write it down, I actually forget said great question. So just jot that question down. If it's time sensitive, so if it's about something that Rich is taking us through, I'll jump in and we'll actually get that question resolved there and then. Otherwise, we'll keep it for the end of the session when we do the Q&A. If you're listening through headsets or speakers and have any issues with your connection, note on the control panel the raise hand button. If you click on that, one of the team will rush and jump in and try and resolve the issue. Alternatively, in the email that was sent to you with your registration confirmation, all of the necessary phone numbers and codes are on there, so you can actually just jump on and join us via that means. So with that being said, I'm actually going to introduce you now to our special guest. So we've got Minta joining us today. Rich is the Senior Solution Consultant Manager for ANZ for Sprinklr. Rich, I'm going to hand over to you so you can give us a little bit more insight into who you are and we can get this session underway.
Thank you very much, Fran. Lovely to meet everyone virtually for those who are listening or even watching the recording. So I basically lead the pre-sales team here, Fran, at Sprinklr. I've been here for 7 years. So have seen, I guess, the company that once was a social media management platform, certainly when I joined, which is now very much a lead player in the CCaaS space. And that's where, we spend a lot of our time these days as we've, built out the product to meet our customer demands, both locally here in ANZ as well as in our global partners as well. So that's me in a nutshell. All right, so
let's get started, Rich. Great topic, and it's something that everybody is interested in at the moment, particularly around that multiple use and application.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to step you through a 3-tier agenda. Okay, so these are going to be the 3 talking points for today. So the first things first, like every good presentation, we need a little bit of market analysis, right? Let's understand exactly what's going on in the market. And what's the why, right? So what's the why in terms of, AI? Why is AI, which we all know is a bit of an industry buzzword in today's market? How do we help kind of contextualize that, both from 2 perspectives? And I think often we talk a lot about the customer experience and the customer perspective, but we're actually going to flip it. We're actually going to flip it and also talk about the agent perspective, okay? I'm then going to talk you through what we see, certainly at Sprinklr, a typical customer experience journey. Now, naturally, if we had a bit more time with you, Fran, we would step through this in a lot more detail, right? But I think just for today's call, we've got less than an hour now. I'm going to run a quick synopsis, a bit of an overview, but enough flavor, I think, maybe to get the audience thinking. And then the last bit, we'll wrap it up with some of the key takeaways, some of the insights, and then we'll follow up with a Q&A. Okay, so that's the 3-part agenda. So first things first, let's talk about the market. Now, Gartner, for those of you who understand Gartner very, very well, the latest research that these guys have come out with is really talking about 70% of customers are using self-service channels at some point in the customer journey. So if you think about your own experiences, right, just as a customer, forget the Sprinklr name and just forget, Auscontact for a second. Think about your own personal experiences, how you interact with brands. So whether that is retail, whether it's telco or banking, customer needs are more demanding now than ever, right? We're exceptionally impatient across the board. So therefore, we continually want instant gratification for things, right? And instant gratification is really about the ability of me as a consumer to have that interaction without the brand, without even necessarily to speaking to the brand. But the challenge with that sometimes actually falls down to the technology itself. So only 9% can fully resolve their issues by self-serve. Now, that's a major challenge in the industry, right? Again, instant gratification, you've got multiple channels now, be it from the more traditional play, so IVR and moving in the voice, and now you're moving into async messaging, you're moving into broader digital and social. There's a lot of digital touch points happening. So therefore, how do you maintain a seamless customer experience across all those digital touch points? And I'm going to touch on that coming up very, very shortly. So 3 things to think about. Okay, 3 things to think about from an organizational perspective. So if we kind of go from left to right, first things first, how do we drive self-serve? Now, some of you on this call, hopefully already doing this, but you're probably not doing all of it. And if you are doing all of it, there might be some gaps. So if you think about, again, first touch point of a consumer is often going into channels like Google. It's also now going into first touch, which is actually Instagram, right? Instagram is rivaling that first touch away from Google because that's how consumers often search for information. So things like SEO optimized websites and web pages and communities and forums and blogs is absolutely imperative to ensure that you're indexing correctly. But more importantly, you are not building FAQ documents on page 29 of a website where consumers are continually trying to search to find something. We all know the challenge with that. Long dwell times leads to frustrated customers, can then lead to potential churn or a lost acquisition opportunity. So we believe by optimizing from an SEO, you're going to help increase self-service. You're going to help increase visibility, and as a business outcome is obviously reducing down operational costs, right? Reduce cost of service. That's the first one. The second thing is basically guiding your customers from start to finish. So now this is kind of starting to move into the holy grail, right? Which is predefined workflows, which basically can be customer facing. So we're now moving into things like guided workflows, right? It could be potentially moving into some of that async messaging. And obviously that's helping improve some of the bottom line and the top line metrics about customer experience, but improving CSAT and potentially improving NPS, which is often built in annual reports, right? So again, most of you should be pretty familiar with those business metrics. And then the final one is really to make sure that we're delivering human-like experiences. We have all had and still continue to have horrendous bot experiences. Now, bots can sit within conversational AI. And as technology, moves, I think I read, there's around 1,000 AI applications launching every week at the moment, which is obviously insane, but that's where the market has gone. So a lot of these interactions are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and it's certainly mimicking that human-to-human interaction, meaning that we can either remove some of the self-serve in terms of the low touch, and even now moving it into some of those more challenging use cases, those slightly more complicated use cases to help alleviate pressure from agents across multiple channels and across multiple languages. So again, improving customer experiences and help increase NPS. Okay, so they're kind of like the big three. Now, when you start looking underneath the hood of this, this is now driving direct business value. So what is the business value of self-service? Okay, that's kind of tying back into the exam question of today's webinar. Some of these are self-explanatory. For first things first is support costs. How do we help reduce down operational costs of the contact center? One of those is obviously moving into things like conversational AI or self-help forums or guided workflows. We know from our own experiences, as well as from our partners, that a typical cost per interaction is around $8 for voice and email for live chat, especially for voice, right? Exceptionally expensive in the Australian market. Average contact is around 12 minutes. It's around $1 a minute, okay? Super expensive. If you want to move that customer into async, so let's talk WhatsApp, let's talk Apple Business Chat, let's talk about mobile SDK, conversational AI on your website. Some of these we know are as low as 5 cents per interaction. So again, reduce considerable cost. Obviously slower, right? If I have to phone and sit on a call for 10 minutes and I'm moving through multiple IVR bots, that can become frustrating. So it can be quite slow versus obviously allowing maybe peers to come over the top. So again, that peer-to-peer review and that peer-to-peer helping communities and forums is a great way of doing that. Customer satisfaction. So I mentioned earlier, in most annual reports at a board level, a C-suite level, you will often find the word NPS. Now, there's a lot of debate over NPS, which I completely understand, which I'm not going to go into this call, but broadly speaking, it is a metric, okay? The second one is also CSAT. So how do we bring in predictive CSAT in real time that monitors the intent to every single interaction on every single channel, as well as the ability to things like whisper into phone calls. So if a voice, customer raises voice, potentially on a self-serve, how do we use AI to alleviate some of that pressure and move straight into a human interaction? And then the fourth one, and I think this is a biggie, is all about attrition, right? We need to make sure that the contact center is the most productive contact center possible, and that's making agents happy, right? We know typically an attrition could be around 2 years for an agent. That internal, that back-end process away from the customer absolutely has to be streamlined and efficient by equipping agents with the tools so they have self-service themselves. Okay, without having to jump to 5 or 6 different screens, which often happens. You've got a CRM, you've got a different vendor for voice, you've got a different vendor for live chat, you've got a different vendor for social, different vendor for messaging. You kind of get the idea, right? How do we bring that all into one screen without multiple channel switching or tech hopping? Okay, so AI is not just chatbots. Right? I think there's the AI and the myth of chatbots is kind of stuck. But the good thing is, as we move into 2022 and 2023, we are now seeing a big change in this, okay? So it's all about knowing the unknowns, okay? Knowing the unknowns. And you're going to understand a little bit more about this in a second. So how do we bring in real-time voice of the customer to help drive the intelligence of the logic and the decision trees to help build out our self-serve strategy, right? We can't use subjective opinions. We can't just use focus groups and survey data. It's out of date the moment you bring it in and you optimize it. You've got to be real time. And I'll explain from a real world customer in a second of who we're doing that with to help unlock business value, okay? So we'll talk about front end and back end. Now, these are some of the components. They're not all of them. So let me kind of build this out. So again, we're talking agent and the customer lens to make the customer experience and the agent happier. So let's build some of this out. If you look at the first four, first things first, we need real-time data. We need real-time data on owned and earned conversations. Did the audience know that 80% of every conversation about a brand is unstructured on blogs and forums and websites and news and social? They are those conversations being taught about you, not necessarily to you, right? So you need to have real-time actual data plugged into the contact center to help build out your strategy for self-serve and AI. Absolutely business critical. Then you're moving into some of the actual strategies and some of the channel strategies, right? So omnichannel conversational AI builder, right? The ability to build out conversational AI with no code. Drag and drop, build it once for live chat and deploy it across every single channel within 5 minutes. That technology exists today. You don't have to use HTML code and get charged by a middleman $5,000 to change a decimal point. You don't have to live in that world anymore. The game's changed, okay? Conversational AI voice bots. So again, if I'm phoning up, I have the ability to run an IVR, and that voice bot can sit in many, many different languages to, again, help drive that interaction before it obviously even hits an agent, or at least give the agent context, okay? Guided workflows on the website. This is a biggie. So we see this a lot. Rather than using an FAQ page on your website on page 29, build it as part of your homepage, right? So what's the benefit to that? Again, we're relieving pressure from the agents and we're providing a much deeper experience. And of course, that can even be built based on customer journey stages. And then you're moving into things like self-serve communities. Again, SEO optimized that allow customers to come in to be served by other customers. So now we're talking about brand advocates. Brand advocates can influence a decision by up to 60%, right? 60%. Very much seen in the telco space, right? A lot of telcos build this in as part of their strategy. Even banks build this as part of their strategy as well now. SEO optimized knowledge bases, interactive Q&A, single screen for your agents. So again, I mentioned earlier about not having multiple screens for agents, right? Bring that under a universal case queue. So an agent has context, whether they spoke to on voice, to email, to live chat, to messaging, to social, to SMS. Omnichannel for insights. And then, the last one is making sure we've got channel coverage. Self-serve is across all channels. It's not just about voice, right? It's not just about digital. It has to be across all channels. So channels like Reddit, which is the world's largest community forum on the planet, that's where your customers are often speaking to you about your brand. What are you doing with that data? What are you doing with the insights on Google Play and iOS app reviews, productreview.com.au, right? All of these are data sources that you can bring in to help build out that self-serve strategy, okay? So let's talk a little bit about customer journey, okay? So this is a very top line journey that we often talk about at Sprinklr. Naturally, they become super tailored based on the individual brand we're speaking to and the use cases we're solving. But first things first is channel coverage, which I just mentioned. So if a customer's talking about a product, use those insights to start building out your IVR, right? If a customer's going to speak to you on an IVR, use those insights to build out what that IVR strategy is through maybe first-party data ingestion as well. The third part, is then about enabling, you have an SEO built community that is Google indexed and ranked. So your customers can find the information quickly and effectively. And if a customer does decide to speak to you, make sure they've got that plugged directly into contact center. So again, embedded live chat on the community to have that one-to-one communication. Again, could also be self-serve as well. Fourth one is about conversational AI chatbots and voice bots. Okay, drag and drop, no code, using all the same data I talked about in point number 1. So that's from a customer perspective. Now let's flip it. So what does it look like from an agent perspective? Okay, agent perspective. Potentially universal case queue, skills-based routing, all the usual stuff. What about splitting it based on AI intent? So we're now looking at the intent of the message, categorizing those messages engageable or non-engageable, or complaints and inquiries to, again, alleviate pressure from the agents and helping agents move into a self-serve perspective, because they've then got some of the agent smarts that live in the unified agent desktop. So agent smarts defined as AI smart cases, or maybe using generative AI within the actual agent console themselves across 25 different channels, right? That's how many channels customers can speak to you on. The question is, do you look at them and are you monitoring those channels right now? That's something that the audience should really think about. The 7th one is then obviously integrating into that CRM, right? We know the usual suspects. making sure that is bi-directionally integrated in to, again, to help alleviate pressure for the agent. So when the customer speaks to them, they've already got context to the case summary. Seventh one, supervisor console. So we're now moving into the final bit, which is the auditability of the whole journey. So how do we know what the drop-off point is in the self-serve strategy? This is what number 8 is about. So it's actually understanding, are 20% of your customers dropping off at the very first touch point in a bot, be it, voice, or whether it's being digital. How do we use those insights to optimize? Okay, so that's a typical journey end to end. So what I'm now going to do is break this down. So let's talk about the very first thing, which is about insights. Okay, so if you have the ability as a business to listen to all conversations on the digital web, we're not just talking about social listening now. Most of you are familiar with the term social listening. That is literally 5% of what is possible. The real question you've got to ask yourself is, why don't you listen to blogs and forums and RSS feeds and video comments and async channels, and maybe uploading first-party data like surveys and call transcripts and focus group data, right? Bring all of that unstructured data, which is 80% of conversations, and use those insights to build out bot workflows, completely bespoke for the customer. Looking at the intent of what customers are saying on their channel of choice, right? Using that data to uncover the black holes, the black box of what you may not be aware of. So we actually conducted this very recently with a very, very large utility company. And they ingested over 25,000 social media messages, transcripts, and surveys. They used that data and they built out an async messaging strategy for Apple Business Chat, WhatsApp, and Web Live Chat to now build out multiple intents that they did not identify previously. Okay, so that's the first bit. Use real-time data to build out your self-serve strategy and your workflows. Okay. The second one. So the second one is actually going to encompass all 5 of these aspects. Okay, so we're now talking from a customer lens, from a channel strategy, so routing, deflection, and then moving it into an agent strategy. So let's talk about self-serve across all channels. Now, first things first, AI is your best friend, right? And we'll talk a little bit around generative AI in a second. You have to make that intentional and purposeful. So if you think about it from a customer point of view, let's make sure that the strategies and the self-serve that we're bringing in is completely relevant to the type of questions your customers are asking you. So if your customers are asking to potentially buy a product on your website, why would you send them to call up the customer contact number when you have the ability to send a secure form in their channel of choice to take payment without ever having an interaction with an agent? That technology exists today. So again, the business value here is that we're reducing down operational costs. We're taking away potentially some of the complex queries. Of course, you can still do bot to agent handover like everyone else, but we're helping to drive a seamless experience, right? Completely seamless experience. From a back-end technology point of view, I mentioned earlier about drag and drop and the ability to build out self-serve without having to rely on weeks and weeks in development work, weeks and weeks of statement of works and invoices coming through from back internal teams or even middle suppliers here. This technology is there today that allows you to build a self-serve strategy and deploy it live in no more and no less than around 7 weeks. Okay, 7 weeks across 3 or 4 key channels of yours. It's there today. The second point is from an agent perspective. Now, if we're looking at self-serve, the chances are we're probably going to be deflecting more complex queries to agents. So therefore, we need to make sure that the agent has the best possible technology within the agent console itself, as well as the supervisor console, right? So let's talk about what some of those might be. Some of them might be guided workflows that can be obviously customer facing but also agent facing. So in other words, let's help the agent ask the right questions to the customer based on the intent and the model that we've built back of house. So if a customer's talking about returning a product for a refund, let's make sure that we've got the right questions that the agent needs to ask the customer in real time based on existing cases. So that's existing cases looking at agents liking that guided workflow, as well as the ability for the CSAT of closing that case for that guided workflow to be 90 plus, okay? We could also look at similar cases. So if me, Richard Minta, have come in and talked about renewal my contract, possibly for a telco use case, let's bring in a similar case to mine and serve those recommendations back to the agent to resolve instantly, okay? So again, it's all about self-service for the agent without having to swivel between multiple different solutions, okay? And again, across all channels, 25, not just across the one or the two. This is obviously a biggie, generative AI. We see this everywhere in today's market, right? Everywhere you go. So on the right-hand side is actually just a short GIF that I actually thought I'd embed in this presentation. It actually shows Sprinklr's agent desktop, right? Multi-channel, full case history, obviously in the middle pane there, and then you've got various knowledge base articles and profile information and predicted CSAT, right? Sprinklr works directly with OpenAI, right? This is fully bedded in and it's been live for quite a while now. And this is purposely there to help reduce down the friction and the burden for agents to go and source information. So let's say, you know, Fran, you're a customer and I'm an agent. It's quite a complex case, right? How do we use generative AI to automatically provide a case summary of that conversation? And we've spoken maybe about 30 or 40 different interactions over that one case. How do we provide a case summary that provides an executive overview of what that next best action should be for the agent? How do we do that, right? That's some of the AI capabilities that's there. How do we potentially automatically translate from English to Mandarin in real time? Again, you can use generative AI to do that. Let's say you've got some challenges in terms of profanities and tone of voices, right? How do we maintain the tone of voice that the agent is speaking to from a self-serve without necessarily the agent physically having to write that message, where we might be going off brand, there might be some typos, you know, some broader issues with it. We allow AI to automatically rewrite the whole message for you instantly and provide 6 or 7 different options, okay? And of course, that can be tailored for the brand as well. So a lot of these smarts are now existing within the industry. And what we're now going to see, broadly speaking, is a much, much deeper experience for agents to stop things like attrition, right? We've got to make their life easier, right? And what we're seeing and what we hear a lot from our customers before they join Sprinklr, it's just too hard. You know, we've got 3 or 4 different screens I have to plug in and I'm trying to work out what I'm doing, onboarding. You know, I even heard horror stories of having a 495-page manual sat on an agent's desk that they have to read before they join the company, right? You don't need to do that anymore. How do we become a more self-serve and proficient experience?
And Rich, I think picking up on your point there, there's probably a couple of things with that.
Yeah.
You know, whether we call it engagement, right? If you think about attrition as a number, we're seeing right across the industry, they still remain pretty high.
Yeah.
If we can do anything to create confidence in the end user, so confidence in that agent,
Yeah.
at an earlier point in that onboarding journey, and you know, providing them with the supportive tools behind that really helps that. It's almost this inbuilt safety net, right? So number one, you've actually got effective people sooner in the chain. But equally, to your point, actually, if you engage them and give them great tools, they're more likely to stay because it isn't too hard. So there really is that, you know, both sides of the challenge that we're seeing at the moment. If you're only going to have someone there for 12 months,
yeah,
we can use AI and tech to actually have the right tools to make them their speed to competency that much sooner. Actually, your return on them is a much higher element.
Agree. And, we've actually had a scenario quite recently. We actually reduced attrition by 30% just by embedding some of these smarts into that agent desktop, right? And I think the big one as well is the onboarding. Like, a lot of people forget onboard, especially during COVID, right? Think how difficult that was to onboard an agent where, most agents were working from home. You've got data and privacy issues there. How do we help fast track that? Guided workflows is a perfect example of that, right? Inbuilt into the product, helps alleviate the pressure where you've got really complex cases, especially where you're working with product SKUs. I think retailers is a good example. Certainly, FinServe, insurance and banking, that are very complex. You've got legality issues everywhere across the board. That actually mitigates some of that. Not all of it, but it certainly mitigates some of it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the final one is then about reporting, right? Real-time insights, omnichannel, to really get under the skin about the performance of self-serve. Okay. I often find this is one of those gaps which doesn't really get talked about a lot. So let's just take one use case. One use case could be conversational AI. Okay. So I would like to measure the impact of the very first or second touch point of a customer speaking to me on, let's say, live chat, right? How would you know where the drop-off rates? How would you know what some of the challenges are at that drop-off rate, right? And then how do you then optimize it? So if you're relying on weeks and weeks of work from a dev team, so let's say you've got 5 or 6 devs sat behind the team, and their role is to optimize the self-serve strategy built on someone writing a brief and then charging you a statement of work cost that can literally cost $5,000. And I've seen it multiple times. $5,000 to change a decimal point on a comma. It's not sustainable, right? It has to be real time. So in order to be real time, you need to have drag and drop, right? It needs to be condition trees. It needs to be the ability to look at that 30,000 foot view. So this is just an example on the right here, a 30,000 foot view at looking at my voice bots, my messaging bots, my even community bot, my customer facing knowledge base, right? To understand where people are clicking or not clicking, where people are getting stuck within the journey. And then from there, completely customize that experience in real time and then deploy that in minutes. That is an exceptionally powerful tool, because what it's going to stop doing, it's going to stop customers picking up the phone and then moving into maybe a good IVR or a substandard IVR and then get stuck, right? We don't want customers to get stuck. And also we want to try and reduce down OpEx back to the business to then provide a more seamless experience, reinvest those dollars back in, right? We don't want customers getting frustrated and complaining about, a bot, which quite frankly is useless to them. And again, we've all had that experience, right? We've all had it, unfortunately. But where the market is now gone, I think, not just here at Sprinklr, we're seeing it elsewhere, it's getting a lot smarter. There's a lot more intelligence that sit behind generative AI, which I think is a really exciting opportunity, right, for the industry. So, looking forward to see what happens and plays out from a tech point of view over the next 12 months. But I suspect we'll see a lot of improved versions, right? Hopefully from me as a customer, certainly to some of the banks that may be a customer of mine already. So that's exciting. Okay. So this is now moving towards, I guess, a bit of a summary of what we've talked about, right? This is part of the methodology to why Sprinklr. First things first, AI has to be across everything. It's not just in certain elements. AI has to be across really these 4 pillars. So the first things first is you've got to understand where your customers are and listen to their channel of choice. If you are not listening to blogs and forums and review sites, you are missing out on 80% of conversations about your customers right now, right? If you are just running quality assurance on 2% of your phone calls, you're missing out on 98% of insights. You can solve that by having 100% Q&A on every interaction across 30 plus different channels. Again, technology's there today. Use those insights to build out your AI and self-serve strategy, use it to build the workflows, and then start deploying that across the attraction. So we're now moving to kind of that acquisition play, all the way to point number 4, which is retention. Okay, so we're not talking multi-channel here, we're talking true omni-channel. A lot of people talk about omni-channel. It's not. They've got a multi-channel approach because they're using multiple different solutions in place. The generative AI is the listen, the learn, and the act, right? You know, we've been using that kind of term for quite a while now in the industry. Listen to your customers and their channel choice, learn about it, and then deploy it in a self-serve strategy on knowledge bases and public-facing community forums, and also for the agent. And then act on it because I can understand the insights in real time where the drop-off points are and measure that end-to-end under one unified platform. Okay, so that is broadly a bit of the 6M, so customer experience management strategy end-to-end. I think a lot of people have been talking about this for many, many years, but get stuck on, you know, maybe point 2 and 3 on this. But yeah, we believe we have an answer for that. Okay, so what are some of the key takeaways? So these are some of the key takeaways I want to talk about. First things first, 66% of your customers will try self-serve, right? They will try it. First impressions is everything. If you do not deploy a robust self-serve strategy from day one, you're already failing because customers won't try it again, which means that they're going to phone up the contact center potentially, which means higher cost to serve, right? Which means more pressure on agents, okay? So we know there is an opportunity to resolve complex issues by agents, right? Through some of the channel strategies we've already talked about in today's session, chatbots and forums and AI-powered routing by about 41%, okay? Again, these are coming from Gartner as well as some of our own data that we're seeing across the board. Decrease caseloads. We've got to make the stickiness for agents more attractive, right? We've got to ensure that we're running conversational AI and true async messaging across all channels. The biggest 2 channels that we hear a lot about is Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp. You know, 13 million monthly active users are on WhatsApp. 13 million. Why would you exclude that from a channel strategy? It makes 0 sense, right? It's more than 50% of the population. And then, of course, saving agents time, right? We've got to save time, free up their workload, and making sure that our agents don't fall from the tree and leave the company, right? And that then makes sure that we then actually provide a much more seamless experience end-to-end on both sides of the fence, okay? So there's some of the big value drivers that we see in the AI-powered self-serve strategy. So Fran, I hope you don't mind, but I thought our audience might be interested in CX Connect, okay? So we're very excited at Sprinklr. We have CX Connect hosted in Sydney on July the 13th between 9 a.m. and 12:30. So we would absolutely love for those who are listening and watching a recording to scan that QR code to register. We've got some amazing guest speakers, right? So these are some of the lineup. So we've got Timothy Whitfield, who's GM of Technology from Woolworths Group. We've got people like Darren coming, who's a product owner from Bupa. We've got Accenture coming, and obviously your good self, Fran. So very much looking forward to catching up with you next week. And then we've got Josh, who's SVP Sales of our Sprinklr service, who deals very much in the CCaaS space. So please register. I will say there is a limited availability. So if you are interested, I would love to personally have a conversation with you. It's going to be one of our big events for the year at Sprinklr. So please register, and yeah, little plug from me. So I hope you don't mind.
Thanks, Rich. No, I think it's going to be a really good session next week, and certainly, you know, if I look at some of the work being done in Woolworths and Bupa, both of them are making some real inroads into you know, how they're using AI, where they're using it, what that self-service journey is from a customer experience lens. So there's some really cool, innovative and new things actually happening within organisations. And it's something I always say about the contact centre industry. It's one that is incredibly generous as far as sharing stories and really allowing others to learn from case studies. So yeah, if you're in Sydney, as Rich said, check it out, see if there's some any availability left. But yeah, jump on and have a quick look at that. Rich, we've got a question from earlier, and it was relating to the conversation we had in relation to speed to competency and some of those new opportunities that are emerging. And we've got a lot of organisations that are still very committed to digital and self-service, and as a journey, offering choice for customer, right? But they still then say that it's human where it matters. So again, this additional use of AI is a really good one, right?
Yeah. The
question that Sharon's posed there is specifically around government and appetite. Sharon, I think you're talking about almost this lack of confidence from government in using AI, and we've seen a lot of interesting positions being taken by government where they've said, right, that's it, everything off your phones, even down to that level for some of their staff because of some of the risks with data. So the question Sharon's asking there is specifically around the confidence with use from a government perspective around their data and the information that can be actually built into it. So it would be good if you could explain a little bit, because obviously there's a solution. It can all be managed behind a wall, to be fair. So do you want to talk a little bit about sort of that risk and the appetite, and actually where government and agencies can actually start to still actually utilise this, still protecting their information?
It's a really, really good question, right? I mean, I think there's a few ways you could look at it. We've actually got quite a few government agencies who are actually partner of ours already, both state and federal. So some of these conversations are definitely happening already. I think first things first, right? If you go back to the presentation, is kind of listening. Now, the listening part, if you think about it, it's all public data. Right, there's nothing happening there which is, going behind firewalls and taking people's data and doing things, we shouldn't be doing. So I would say that the listening part should absolutely be baked into everything you do, and using that data to then help understand what are some of the low-hanging fruit that maybe citizens are referring to from a self-serve point of view. Now, I think AI and generative AI is never, just to be clear on this, it's never there to replace an agent. It's never there to replace human-to-human interaction, right? But I think it is absolutely there to remove some of the low-hanging fruit requests that come in, right? Maybe it's related to removing some PII, right? So maybe you don't tackle the PII questions, okay? Now in the background, we have things like secure forms, right? PCI secure forms that allow customers to store data in a very, very secure manner, right? So again, that's one way of doing it. You obviously have true customer authentication. Okay, so we work with government agencies also in the US who are also well and truly on this journey, and they use multiple tiers of that. So I don't think it's about boiling the ocean from day dot. My recommendation is truly understanding what are the intents from citizens that they are asking for, and building out a strategy about what some of those, let's say, easier self-serve opportunities may be, before you go after complex inquiries, right? Because I completely understand there may be some challenges there, right? I'm not naive enough to do that, but that's where I would start it and then build from there.
Thanks, Rich. And I know that, depending on the government agency, you will have almost the net effect of a customer's needs that actually create the complexity, as opposed to looking any of those one component in isolation.
Yeah.
And I think, Sharon, the other part of your question in relation to, a supportive tool that actually helps your frontline agents talk to the customers in real time in a way that suggests the right information or suggests the question that the customer is actually asking. So that real-time translation. There is an opportunity for the AI lens to actually sit within your organization, only using your information and not sharing it anywhere else. So as far as your knowledge articles, your tools, etc. And as Rich said, all of the information around that deep listening, which is about building, your planning and your, I guess, your journeys from real-time analytics and data. So really using those insights to, enhance your service offering. That is, as Rich said, it's all public. It's all in the public domain. So actually there's zero risk there. It's about how do you build the environment that allows you to then create real insight strategies using that data. I know, Rich, you had a really interesting stat that I wrote down earlier that was around, I think you said only 5% of the real length of and breadth of data that talks about what a customer is saying sits in the traditional socials that most organizations are listening to.
That's right.
So again, if it's only 5% and it's, ad hoc at best, or it's then complemented by our agents sending out a form that says, please tell us about your experience. Chances are we're not going to send that to people who we had a really poor interaction with for a start. So secondly, I would say, how do we really know if we're only listening to 5%? And even that listening is not deep listening by the sounds of things. So there's almost opportunities at each one of those different pathways. But to Sharon's point, I think government is very early on in the journey in Australia. I know we're seeing some jump in and say, how do we do it? So I think, it's one of those evolving spaces for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we work with, many organizations in all verticals. I'll give you an example. So Apple, the brand, is actually a partner of ours, but you've also obviously got Apple, the fruit, right? So what they've done is basically trained a completely custom AI model to their brand. Okay, and we've actually got partners locally who've already done that. And they've deployed that across all channels and all agents in the CCaaS space. So, if you think about self-serve, if you go probably top of the tree, right, let's just go web live chat, right, async. There are often cases, if you type in speak to agent in live chat, the live chat will come back to you and say, sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. And that's because they don't have a custom AI model trained to the intent of the message based on what the self-serve should or wants to be. So for those of you who do have web live chat, please conduct that exercise and test it out, and you'll be quite amazed what you might find out about the capability. So yeah, the experience is everything. So it's got to be tailored to the brand. It cannot just be an out-of-the-box solution. It's got to be tailored. That's a big, big message. Yeah.
Definitely. I think the other, really important message that you've shared today is the opportunity that is both an internal and an external opportunity. So really about bringing all of that together to have that holistic view of self-service. So probably don't know that I'd thought deeply enough about self-service from an internal organization perspective. And again, you're right, it's still a customer. It's a different lens of customer. So, those same principles of ease and, choice and, accessibility and usability have to be applied to both. And I think for some organizations, their view for self-service is all about customer as opposed to internal customer as well. So I think there's a real opportunity there for organizations to kind of take that forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, the AI smarts that now sit within agent desktops are just incredible, right? Absolutely incredible. The days of searching around for buried documents in another system are well gone. I think the guided workflows is probably the number one that we see of completely changing agent onboarding and completely changing and reducing down things like AHT, right, across the board, completely game changing. And then when you start layering in the generative AI doing things like automatic case summaries on a case. So if an agent's, handing over from one to another, they don't have to manually read. So the self-serve that now sits underneath that is you're saving time. And as a result of that, you're obviously saving dollars. So incredible technology that exists in the market today, but, a true CXM strategy or a true omni-channel strategy versus this multi-channel, which I think most people do, is there. It's absolutely there. You just need to explore it.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Rich. We haven't got any other questions there, so we might wrap it up. Again, a good plug for next week. Great opportunity to hear what some of those, experience strategies are and where they're actually getting some real traction and inroads. Hearing those case studies again is something that lets you put yourself in the problem and actually assign the solution within your organization and think about where it could actually start and take off from. But great again to hear about the insights and what it is you're doing. And again, sharing some of those different applications for AI as a tool, I think is, we hear AI everywhere. It's, as you say, the latest buzzword. But probably what is helping the industry more is really seeing those case study and applications and where, people can actually see that there is opportunity for them to really get under the hood a little bit more and understand those applications in their own set of circumstances and with the appetite of their executives. So thank you for today. Fantastic. Thanks everyone for coming along. And those of you in Sydney, we might see you next week. It'll be fantastic sessions. So look out for it, and we'll see you all at the next webinar. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.